Su Amara did not remember walking out of the grand hall. She remembered the laughter. She remembered the sound of it climbing the stone walls, echoing under the painted ceiling, spreading from noble mouths to warrior throats, and from the council platform to the servants near the pillars. It followed her even after the guards pushed her through the side corridor and away from the eyes of the pack. It stayed inside her ears long after the doors closed behind her. It moved with her through the mansion like a second shadow, crueler than the first, sharper than any punishment the council could have given. An Omega like her could never be his mate. Alpha Kael's words had not merely embarrassed her, they had marked her. In Moonstone Pack, words spoken before witnesses became truth whether they were fair or not. A public accusation could stain a name for years. A public insult from an Alpha could become a person's entire identity before sunrise. Amara already knew what they would call her. The Omega who thought she was chosen. The servant who imagined herself above her place. The wolfless girl who mistook pity for a bond. No one would speak of the way Kael froze when he touched her. No one would mention the silence that seized him for that one dangerous breath. No one would ask why he released her so quickly, as though her skin carried fire. The pack would remember only the part that made them comfortable. They would remember his rejection. They would remember her lowered head. They would remember their own laughter as proof that the old order still stood. That was how humiliation worked in Moonstone Pack. It did not need chains. It needed witnesses. The two guards escorting her did not speak. They were not cruel in the loud way some warriors were. They did not shove her more than necessary. They did not laugh directly in her face. Their silence carried its own message. She was no longer only an Omega who had made a mistake. She was trouble. Being near trouble in the Alpha Mansion could cost a servant food, work, shelter, or life. So they kept their eyes ahead, and their hands firm. Amara walked between them with her wounded wrist hidden inside her sleeve. The silver glow had faded beneath the cloth, yet the skin still pulsed with heat. Every step made the mark beneath her shoulder throb. It felt alive now, no longer a quiet secret sleeping under her skin. It felt like something listening. The corridor from the grand hall to the lower wing seemed longer than it had ever seemed before. Moonstone Mansion was filled with hidden divisions. The upper floors shone with polished stone, carved railings, high windows, soft rugs, and lanterns scented with expensive oils. The lower passages changed as one descended. The walls became narrower, the windows became fewer, the air grew warmer from kitchens, laundry rooms, and servant fires. The scents changed too. Less cedar and ceremonial smoke. More soap, ash, wet linen, iron pots, crushed herbs, and the tired breath of those who worked before dawn and slept after midnight. Amara knew every turn. She had walked those passages carrying trays too heavy for her arms. She had run through them with bowls of water for wounded warriors. She had scrubbed their stones on her knees after celebrations, where wolves of high rank spilled wine, and never looked down at the hands that cleaned it. The lower wing had always been hard, yet familiar. That night, even the place where she had grown up seemed to pull away from her. News had arrived before she did. It always did. By the time the guards left her at the entrance to the servants' quarters, every Omega in the room had heard enough to fear standing too close. Women who had once shared bread with her turned their faces toward baskets of laundry. A young kitchen boy who usually smiled at her looked down quickly and pretended to be busy sorting firewood. Two girls near the wash basin stopped whispering as soon as she entered, then lowered their heads as though silence could erase what they had already said. No one asked if she was hurt. No one asked what truly happened. No one wanted to become part of her story. That hurt more than Amara expected. She understood fear. She had lived beside it all her life. She knew Omegas survived by choosing carefully when to show kindness. A soft word given to the wrong person could be seen as rebellion. A shared tear could become evidence of disloyalty. In Moonstone Pack, even compassion had to be hidden like stolen food. Still, knowing why they avoided her did not make it easier to bear. She moved toward her small sleeping corner at the far end of the room. It was little more than a narrow pallet, a folded blanket, and a wooden box where she kept her plain clothes, healing cloth, and the tiny carved comb Nara had once given her on a winter morning. The other Omegas watched without watching. Their eyes followed the movement of her sleeve. Their bodies leaned away. She sat carefully, her breath uneven. For a few seconds, she allowed herself to close her eyes. Then the laughter returned. It came not from the room this time, only from memory. Kael's hand around her wrist. The word inside his wolf. Mate. The shock in his eyes. The rejection that followed. The hall roaring. Isolde smiling. Elder Varric watching. Amara pressed her wrapped wrist against her chest. The bond had not vanished. That was the worst part. The Alpha had denied it before everyone, yet denial had not broken the thread. Somewhere beneath the pain, beneath the shame, beneath the anger she had no safe place to release, she could still feel something. A faint pull, a warmth where his hand had been, a memory her body refused to surrender. She hated it. She hated that a part of her still reached toward the man who had wounded her in public. She hated that her heart remembered the one moment before his cruelty, the one moment when his eyes had looked almost afraid, almost human, almost as shaken as she felt. She hated that she wanted answers from him. Amara's fingers tightened around the edge of her blanket. She had lived through insults before. She had been called weak, useless, wolfless, burden, charity child. She had swallowed those words because resisting them would have changed nothing. This was different. Kael's rejection had touched the secret places inside her. It had woken something. It had opened a door she had spent her life not knowing existed. A soft movement near the entrance made every servant straighten. The head servant had arrived. Madra was a severe woman with gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight knot and eyes that had learned to weigh risk faster than kindness. She had served 3 generations of Alpha blood and had survived by making discipline look like loyalty. Among Omegas, her word carried almost as much weight as a guard's command. She controlled duties, food portions, sleeping assignments, and punishments minor enough for nobles not to notice. She stood in the doorway and scanned the room until her gaze landed on Amara. The silence deepened. Madra did not raise her voice. She did not need to. Amara. The name fell across the room with the weight of an order. Amara stood. Her knees felt unsteady. She kept her eyes lowered, not in obedience alone, also to hide the anger beginning to gather inside her. Anger was dangerous for an Omega. Anger made the powerful uncomfortable. Anger made them eager to remind you how little protection you had. Madra came closer, her face unreadable. For one heartbeat, Amara hoped the older woman might ask what happened. Madra had never been warm, yet she had never been needlessly cruel either. She had taught Amara how to fold ceremonial cloth properly, how to avoid noble tempers, how to read the mood of a room before entering it. She had corrected her harshly at times, spared her quietly at others. In another life, that might have been care. That night, Madra only looked at the wrapped wrist, then at Amara's face. Her voice lowered. "The chosen Luna has requested your presence." The room changed at once. Several Omegas looked up despite themselves. Even the kitchen boy stopped moving. Isolde. The name did not need to be spoken loudly to carry threat. Isolde was not Luna yet, although the mansion already behaved as if she were. She had rooms in the upper east wing. Her attendants wore finer cloth than most servants owned. Warriors greeted her with respect. Elders listened when she spoke. Her family had given Moonstone Pack fighters, land, and old alliances. The moon blessing ceremony would make official what everyone already expected. Alpha Kael would accept her. Isolde would become Luna, and Amara, the Omega publicly touched and rejected by the Alpha, had been summoned to her dressing chamber. Madra's mouth tightened slightly, enough for Amara to notice. "You will go," she said. "You will answer only what you are asked. You will not cry. You will not argue. You will not bring more attention to this wing." Amara swallowed. Madra stepped closer, her voice dropping even further. "Being noticed by an Alpha is dangerous. Being noticed by the woman meant to stand beside him is worse." For the first time that night, someone spoke a truth without decoration. Amara nodded. Madra studied her for a moment, and something almost like pity passed through her eyes. It vanished quickly. "Cover your wrist," she added, "and keep your head down." Amara did not ask how much Madra had seen. She did not ask whether the head servant knew anything about the glow beneath her skin. In Moonstone Pack, questions were doors. Some doors had teeth. She wrapped her sleeve tighter around her wrist and followed the passage toward the upper east wing. Each step carried her farther from the servant quarters and deeper into a world where every object reminded her she did not belong. The floors became smoother. The walls opened into grander arches. Lanterns glowed with amber light. The air smelled of jasmine oil, polished wood, and fresh flowers brought in for the coming ceremony. Servants moved quickly along the edges of the corridors, carrying gowns, jewel boxes, folded veils, trays of fruit, silver combs, and basins of warmed water. The mansion was preparing for celebration. That detail nearly made Amara laugh, except the sound would have broken her. While she carried shame back to the lower wing, the upper halls prepared to crown the woman who had watched her humiliation with pleasure. The moon blessing ceremony was only a night away. It was the ceremony where Kael would stand before the pack, before the elders, before the moon altar, and accept Isolde as his chosen Luna. It would not only be a romantic union, it would be political, ceremonial, and sacred in the eyes of Moonstone law. Two strong bloodlines would be joined. The council would be satisfied. Isolde's family would gain honor. Kael would silence whispers about his refusal to choose a mate. Amara should have been invisible during such a ceremony. She should have been washing robes, carrying water, grinding herbs, preparing the hall, and keeping her head bowed while the powerful arranged their future. Instead, she had become a crack in the ceremony before it even began. Isolde's dressing chamber stood behind double doors painted with pale moonflowers. Two attendants stood outside. They looked Amara over in open dislike, taking in her plain servant dress, her loosened braid, the sleeve wrapped too tightly around her wrist. One attendant knocked softly and opened the door without waiting for Amara to prepare herself. The chamber inside was larger than the entire servants' sleeping room. Silver curtains fell from tall windows. Lamps of carved crystal cast soft light over polished mirrors. A long table held ivory combs, perfume bottles, moonstone pins, and bowls of crushed pearl powder. 3 gowns hung near the wall, each one more beautiful than anything Amara had ever touched without fear of staining it. The main gown, placed on a wooden form near the center of the room, was pale silver with delicate embroidery along the bodice, shaped to catch candlelight like water under the moon. Isolde sat before a mirror. Her hair fell in dark waves over one shoulder, while an attendant threaded tiny silver beads through it. She did not turn immediately when Amara entered. She let the silence stretch. That too was a form of power. Making another person stand and wait reminded them who controlled the room. Amara stopped several steps from the dressing platform and bowed her head. Isolde studied her reflection in the mirror. Then she smiled, not kindly, not openly cruel. A slow, graceful smile, meant to look harmless to anyone who did not understand how wolves with soft voices could still draw blood. So this is the Omega who disturbed the entire hall tonight. Her voice was smooth, almost amused. Amara said nothing. Isolde lifted one hand, and the attendant stopped arranging her hair. Another servant moved aside. The room became still. Isolde finally turned. Up close, her beauty was impossible to ignore. She had the kind of face poets praised, and rivals feared. Sharp cheekbones, calm eyes, a mouth trained for ceremony. Every movement carried the confidence of someone raised to believe the world would make space for her. She looked at Amara the way a noble woman might look at mud on the hem of her gown. "You may raise your eyes," Isolde said. Amara obeyed only enough to see her face. Isolde rose slowly and crossed the room. The silver beads in her hair caught the light. Her ceremonial robe whispered across the floor. "I have been told many versions of what happened," she said. "Some say you entered the Alpha's chamber hoping he would notice you. Some say you were caught touching his healing cloth. Some say you invented a story about hearing his wolf." Amara's throat tightened. "I heard it," she said softly. "His wolf was in pain." Isolde tilted her head. There was no surprise on her face. Only interest sharpened into something dangerous. "And you thought you were the one meant to answer it?" The question entered Amara like a blade hidden under silk. "I thought someone should know." "Someone?" Isolde's smile deepened. "Or you?" Amara looked down again. The chamber felt too warm. Her wrist began to throb beneath the sleeve. She forced her fingers to stay still. Isolde circled her once, slowly, not rushing, not touching, inspecting, measuring, making Amara feel every inch of the difference between them. "Tell me something, little Omega." The words were gentle enough to sound almost playful. Amara's body went still. Isolde stopped in front of her. "What did you feel when the Alpha touched you?" The room seemed to narrow. The attendants did not move. Even the lamps appeared quieter. Amara had expected accusation. She had expected threats. She had expected to be told to stay away from Kael. She had not expected the question to land so directly on the one truth she could not safely answer. What did she feel? Fire. Recognition. Fear. A pull so deep it frightened her. a word neither she nor Kael had spoken aloud. Mate. Amara kept her face as still as she could. Nothing, she said. Isolde's eyes sharpened. Nothing. He was angry, Amara said. He grabbed my wrist, that was all. The lie tasted bitter. Isolde stepped closer. You expect me to believe the Alpha froze in front of the entire pack over nothing? Amara's heartbeat quickened. So Isolde had noticed. Perhaps not everything. Perhaps not the glow. Perhaps not the bond. Enough. Amara lowered her voice. I do not know why he stopped. Isolde watched her for a long moment. Then she laughed softly. The sound was quiet, elegant, and colder than shouting. You are either very foolish, she said, or you have learned how to lie with a servant's face. Amara's hands curled at her sides. A servant's face. That was what the powerful called the expression Omegas wore to survive. Blank enough not to offend, humble enough not to threaten, quiet enough to make cruelty easy. Isolde reached out and took Amara's chin between two fingers, forcing her face upward. Amara flinched at the touch. Not from pain, from the humiliation of it. Isolde's eyes searched hers. You should understand something before tomorrow night, she said. The moon blessing ceremony will happen. Alpha Kael will stand before the pack. He will accept me as Luna. The elders will bless our union. Every wolf in this house will know where power belongs. Amara said nothing. Isolde's grip tightened slightly. And you will not become a story whispered under that ceremony. You will not become a shadow standing between me and what is mine. There it was. Not only jealousy, fear. A woman who truly believed her place was secure would not have summoned an Omega in the middle of the night. She would not have asked what Kael felt. She would not have watched Amara's face so carefully, hunting for signs of a bond she did not want to name. Amara saw it, and seeing it gave her a strange, dangerous courage. She said quietly, I never asked for his attention. Isolde's expression changed, only slightly. Enough. The slap came fast, not brutal. Not enough to throw Amara to the floor, not the kind of violence that left blood. That was the point. It was measured, controlled. A sharp insult delivered with the confidence of someone who knew no one in the room would defend the person receiving it. Amara's face turned with the force. The chamber remained silent. Her cheek burned. For a moment, she saw only the pale floor, the edge of Isolde's silver gown, the reflection of herself in the mirror across the room. Small, poorly dressed, one sleeve torn, one cheek reddening. A girl standing in a room, made for a woman who expected to become queen of the pack. The shame should have bent her. It almost did. Then something moved inside her. Not memory, not thought. Something living. A low awareness rose beneath her ribs. The same presence that had stirred in the hall. The same ancient thing that had answered Kael's touch. It did not roar. It did not demand revenge. It simply opened its eyes inside her. For the first time in Amara's life, she heard her wolf clearly. She is afraid of us. The words passed through her like moonlight through water. Amara forgot to breathe. All her life, silence had lived where her wolf should have been. She had imagined emptiness. She had accepted the shame of being called wolfless, because no inner voice had ever risen to prove them wrong. Now the voice was there. Calm, certain, hers. Amara kept her face lowered, terrified that the shock would show. Isolde mistook her silence for obedience. That mistake may have saved Amara's life. The chosen Luna stepped back, satisfied by the visible mark of insult on Amara's cheek. Omegas who dream above their rank do not become Lunas, Isolde said. They become warnings. Her voice lowered. And some warnings are buried outside the pack border, where no one brings flowers. The words settled into the room. Even the attendants seemed uncomfortable now, though none dared move. Amara's cheek burned. Her wrist pulsed. The mark beneath her shoulder warmed like a coal under cloth. Inside her, the wolf remained awake, watching through her silence. Amara wanted to speak. She wanted to ask why Isolde feared a girl everyone called weak. She wanted to ask what the chosen Luna had seen when Kael touched her. She wanted to ask whether Isolde's confidence was so fragile that one Omega's presence could threaten it. She wanted to say the bond had not asked permission from either of them. Instead, she lowered her head. Because survival still mattered. Because Nara's warning still lived in her bones. Because every wall in that mansion had ears. Because Amara knew very little about the power waking inside her, and unknown power could become a trap if displayed too soon. Her silence did not come from surrender. It came from calculation. That was new. Isolde turned back toward the mirror, signaling the conversation was finished. "Leave," she said, "and remember your place tomorrow." Amara bowed, although the movement tasted like ash. As she walked toward the door, her wolf spoke again, softer this time. "Not our place." Amara nearly stopped. The words were impossible, dangerous, a promise wrapped in defiance. Not our place. For years, the pack had told her where she belonged, at the edge of rooms, beneath command, outside bloodline, below notice, far from power, far from love, far from any future that could lift her head. Now, a voice from inside her rejected all of it. She left Isolde's chamber with her cheek burning and her heart beating differently than it had when she entered. The attendants watched her go. One looked away quickly, perhaps from pity, perhaps from fear. The other stared at the covered wrist as though something in the room had changed and she could not name it. Amara stepped into the corridor. Only then did she release the breath she had been holding. The upper east wing was quiet. Far below, servants continued preparing for the moon blessing ceremony. Somewhere beyond the mansion walls, warriors patrolled under the cold eye of the moon. Somewhere in his private chamber, Alpha Kael carried the memory of her wrist in his palm. Somewhere in the council rooms, Elder Varric was likely asking questions that could get her killed. Amara pressed one hand against her cheek. The slap still stung, yet the pain no longer felt like the center of the night. Something else had taken its place. Her wolf was awake. Not fully, not enough to shift, not enough to protect her from Isolde, the council, or the Alpha who had rejected her. Still awake enough to speak. Awake enough to recognize fear in a woman everyone else admired. Awake enough to tell Amara that the world she had accepted as fixed might not be fixed at all. That was the first true turning point. The public rejection had wounded her. Isolde's insult had sharpened her. The wolf's voice had changed her. Amara returned to the servants' wing alone, walking more slowly this time. She noticed things she had missed before. The guards posted near the east stairs, the council servant carrying sealed messages toward Elder Varric's rooms, the faint scent of silver ash drifting from the ritual corridor, the way one of Isolde's attendants followed at a distance, then vanished when Amara looked back. She was being watched. A few hours earlier, being watched would have made her shrink. Now it made her think. Why did Isolde ask what she felt? Why did Madra warn her so carefully? Why did Nara fear the glow beneath her skin? Why did Kael reject her like a man trying to kill a truth before it could breathe? And why did her wolf say us? Not me. Us. The word followed her into the lower wing. The servants' quarters had quieted by the time she returned. Most Omegas lay on their pallets pretending to sleep. No one asked about Isolde. No one asked about the mark on her cheek. Fear filled the room more thickly than smoke. Amara sat on her narrow bed and unwrapped her wrist beneath the cover of darkness. The silver lines were still there. Faint, delicate, beautiful in a way that frightened her. They ran beneath her skin like tiny rivers of moonlight, fading near her palm, brightening where Kael had touched her. She stared at them until her eyes blurred. For the first time, she did not see only danger. She saw proof. Proof that the pack had been wrong. Proof that the word wolfless had been a cage, not a truth. Proof that something ancient had survived inside her even while she scrubbed floors for those who would fear her if they knew. Her wolf stirred again. Amara did not hear words this time. She felt emotion, not rage, not grief, recognition, the feeling of something waiting patiently in the dark, certain that night would one day give way. A tear slipped down Amara's face. She wiped it quickly, more from habit than shame. The mansion around her prepared for Kael and Isolde's ceremony. By tomorrow night, the pack expected its future to be sealed. Alpha and chosen Luna. Council approval. Noble alliances. Moon blessing. Law obeyed. Order restored. Amara could feel, with a certainty she did not understand, that none of it would go as planned, because Isolde had touched a wound she did not create. Kael had awakened a bond he could not deny forever. Varric had watched a silver glow he had likely waited years to see, and Amara had heard the voice the pack insisted she did not have. If you were Amara, would you stay silent to survive, or speak and risk everything? That question would follow her into the hours ahead, for silence had kept her alive. Yet silence had also helped the pack bury the truth of who she was. And now, for the first time, something inside Amara was no longer willing to remain buried with it. While Amara returned to the lower wing with Isolde's warning burning against her cheek, Alpha Kael walked back through the upper corridors carrying a wound no one in the hall had seen. To the Moonstone Pack, he had ended the matter. He had rejected the Omega. He had defended the Order. He had made it clear before nobles, warriors, elders, servants, and the woman chosen to become his Luna that no forbidden bond would be allowed to stain the Alpha throne. That was what the Pack believed. That was what Kael needed them to believe. The truth followed him through the corridor like a second heartbeat. Mate, the word had not left him. It moved inside his ribs with the force of a command older than his crown. His wolf had spoken it only once, yet once was enough. A wolf did not mistake a mate. A wolf might resist. A man might deny. A ruler might bury the truth beneath law, duty, and pride. The beast inside him knew what it knew. Amara, the Omega, the servant girl, the one they mocked as wolfless, the girl whose wrist had burned silver beneath his fingers. Kael walked faster. The guards lining the corridor lowered their heads as he passed. None of them dared speak. They saw his rigid shoulders, his cold expression, the storm held behind his eyes, and they assumed his anger was directed at the Omega who had entered his chamber. That assumption suited him. Let them think he was offended. Let them think he had only punished disrespect. Let them think his rejection had come from disgust rather than fear. Fear was a word Moonstone Pack did not attach to alphas, especially not to him. Kael had been trained from childhood to understand that an alpha's body did not belong entirely to himself. His voice belonged to the Pack. His strength belonged to the Border. His blood belonged to the future. His hand in marriage belonged to alliance. His grief belonged to private rooms. His pain belonged nowhere at all. He learned early that every weakness, even a human one, could become a weapon in another wolf's hand. So he hid them. He hid the death of his father behind ceremony. He hid the pressure of the council behind discipline. He hid loneliness behind command. And for many moons, he had hidden the sickness eating through his wolf. Only 3 people knew the truth in part. Old healer Nara had seen the early symptoms, although Kael had dismissed her concern before she could ask too many questions. Mother Luna Seraphine knew more than she admitted, because mothers could read what rulers covered. Beta Rowan knew enough to worry, enough to stand too close during full moons, enough to watch Kael's breathing after battles. The rest of the Pack saw what Kael allowed them to see: a ruler still standing, a wolf still feared, an alpha no rival had defeated. The corridor turned toward the private wing. The air cooled. Fewer servants moved here. The lamps burned lower. Ancient portraits lined the walls, each one showing a former alpha of Moonstone Pack. Hard faces, proud eyes, men whose names were spoken with reverence during ceremonies and fear during council lessons. Kael had passed those portraits his entire life. As a child, he used to look at them and wonder whether they had felt as alone as they looked. Now he no longer wondered. He knew. Power had a sound. In public, it sounded like applause, war horns, bowed heads, and orders obeyed. In private, it sounded like locked doors, sleepless nights, and the quiet breath of a wolf trying not to break apart inside its own skin. Kael reached his chamber and entered without waiting for the guards to open the door. The room remained exactly as Amara had seen it earlier. Too cold, too still. The covered healing lamps stood near the far wall. Bowls of unused herbs rested on the table. A blood-stained cloth lay folded beside a bronze basin. Deep claw marks scarred the stone near the bed. 4 long lines gouged into the wall during a night when his wolf had nearly forced a shift Kael could not control. He shut the door. Only then did he let his mask crack. His breath left him in a hard, unsteady sound. He turned and braced one hand against the door, his fingers digging into the carved wood. The hand he had used to grab Amara's wrist shook. Kael stared at it. The burn was still there. Not red, not swollen. Silver. A thin mark across his palm, shaped almost like light trapped under the skin. It glowed faintly when the room grew still, then dimmed whenever he clenched his fist. He had touched warriors soaked in wolfsbane, rogues carrying poison, cursed weapons, blood iron, and ritual ash. None of it had marked him like this. Amara had. The Omega had left silver on him. His wolf stirred, not with the weak restlessness that had tormented him for months, not with the fevered anger that came near the full moon. This movement felt different, focused, alive, hungry for the one thing Kael had just rejected before the Pack. Mate. Kael closed his eyes. No. The word came out low. His wolf answered with pain. The sensation tore through him so sharply that he stumbled away from the door and gripped the edge of the table. One of the bowls tipped, scattering crushed moonleaf across the wood. The scent filled the room, bitter and clean, useless against the sickness coiled beneath his ribs. For months, every full moon had worsened it. At first it was only fatigue after shifting. Kael blamed overtraining, border disputes, council pressure. Then came the fever. Then the black veins that appeared for a few hours after moonrise, moving beneath the skin near his heart, before fading by dawn. Then came the dreams of silver fire, and a woman crying somewhere in a forest he could never reach. The elders had an explanation ready. He had not chosen a Luna. An alpha without a Luna, they said, stood incomplete beneath the moon. His wolf lacked balance. His bloodline lacked the sacred joining needed to settle his strength. The cure, according to them, was simple. Accept Isolde. Complete the moon blessing ceremony. Unite two noble bloodlines. Let the Luna bond stabilize his wolf. That explanation had pleased everyone. It pleased Isolde's family. It pleased the council. It pleased the nobles who wanted certainty. It did not please Kael, because his wolf had never reached for Isolde. Not once. Isolde was beautiful, clever, polished, and powerful in the way Moonstone Pack understood power. She knew the laws. She understood ceremony. She moved through public rooms with the calm control of a woman born to be watched. Any alpha seeking an acceptable Luna could have chosen her, and called it wisdom. Kael had tried to feel what everyone insisted he should feel. Respect, yes. Desire, perhaps in some distant, controlled way. Trust, not fully. Bond, never. His wolf had remained silent near her, cold, unmoved. Yet when he touched Amara, the weakest omega in the hall, the beast inside him had risen from months of sickness with one clear truth: mate. Kael struck the table with his fist. The bronze basin rattled. Pain flashed across the silver burn on his palm, sharper than before. He hissed through his teeth and opened his hand again. The mark brightened for a breath, as if answering his anger. "What are you?" he whispered. He did not mean the burn. He meant Amara. The girl had stood before him with tears in her eyes and fear in her throat, telling a story no one believed. She heard his wolf. That alone should have been impossible. No ordinary omega could hear an alpha wolf through a sealed door, especially not one trained to suppress its pain. No servant should have felt the private suffering he had hidden from warriors and healers, unless his wolf had called to her, unless something inside her had answered before either of them understood. Kael turned toward the far wall, where the claw marks remained. He remembered the night he made them. The last full moon had nearly destroyed his control. His wolf had clawed against his bones, desperate to escape a pain that had no visible enemy. Nara had brought herbs. Varric had brought old prayers. His mother had stood near the bed with a face too pale to be calm. Elder Varric had said the same thing again. Choose the Luna. Delay no longer. Kael had heard concern in the words. He had also heard eagerness. That was when suspicion first entered him. The sickness had begun after his father's death, shortly after Kael took the alpha seat. Varric called it grief. The council called it imbalance. His mother called it the weight of inheritance. Kael called it a question no one wanted answered. Now Amara had turned that question into danger. A knock came at the door. Kael straightened at once. The mask returned. Enter. Beta Rowan stepped in, closing the door carefully behind him. Rowan had been Kael's closest friend before rank made friendship complicated. They had trained together as boys, fought border raids together as young warriors, and buried Kael's father on the same rain-soaked morning that Kael became Alpha. Rowan was broad, steady, and difficult to frighten. He had the calm eyes of a wolf who noticed more than he said. That night he noticed Kael's hand first. "You are bleeding?" "No." Rowan's gaze lowered to the palm. Kael closed his fist. Rowan did not miss the movement. The room held a silence neither man trusted. "The hall is still speaking about her," Rowan said. Kael moved toward the window. Outside, the northern forest lay under moonlight, black branches, silver mist, distant patrol fires. Somewhere below, servants moved through the courtyard, preparing for a ceremony Kael no longer felt certain he could survive. "What are they saying?" "That she entered your chamber for attention, that you put her in her place, that Isolde handled the insult with grace." Kael's jaw tightened. "And the council?" "Quiet." Kael looked back. Rowan's expression gave weight to that single word. Quiet. In the council, rarely meant peace. It meant calculation. Kael flexed his burned palm. Pain answered. Did anyone see her wrist? Rowan's brows drew together. Her wrist? Kael turned away again. There. A mistake. Too specific. Too quick. Rowan came farther into the room. What happened when you touched her? Kael did not answer at once. He could order Rowan to silence. He could dismiss him. He could bury the question under rank. Yet Rowan already knew him well enough to distrust easy answers. She felt something, Rowan said carefully. Seidel's voice was cold. She is an Omega accused before the pack. She felt fear. That is not what I asked. Kael looked at him then. For a moment, Alpha and Beta stood facing each other, not as ruler and second, not as commander and loyal blade, as two men standing near the edge of a truth that could damage them both. Rowan lowered his voice. Your wolf reacted. Kael said nothing. Rowan's face changed. He had his answer. No, Rowan whispered. Kael's eyes hardened. Do not say it. If it is true, silence will not make it less true. It will keep fools from repeating it. Rowan took in a slow breath. Kael. The use of his name, not title, cut through the room. Kael looked toward the window again. The forest seemed to lean closer. She is an Omega, Rowan said. One the pack already mocks. One the council would never accept. Isolde's family would see it as betrayal. Varric would call it instability. The nobles would split before dawn. Kael's hand tightened around the window ledge. I know what she is. Do you? The question turned Kael's head sharply. Rowan did not step back. Because whatever happened in the hall was strong enough to make you reject her with more cruelty than needed. You were not only silencing gossip, you were trying to silence yourself. Kael moved fast. In the next breath, he stood close enough for the air between them to sharpen. Careful. Rowan bowed his head slightly. Not from fear, from respect for the line he had nearly crossed. I am careful. That is why I am speaking before the council does. Kael held his gaze, then turned away first. The admission cost him more than anger would have. Rowan continued, quieter now. Choosing an Omega as mate would cause rebellion among the elders. Even if the bond is real, they will not honor it. Not openly. Not for her. Not when Isolde has been prepared for the moon blessing. Kael's response came like ice. I did not choose her. The words settled between them. They were true in one sense. He had not asked for the bond. He had not reached into the crowd and selected Amara. He had not chosen the girl whose tears had followed him from the hall to this room. Yet the wolf had chosen. The moon, if one believed the old stories, and Kael had spent his life learning that not all choices belonged to men. Rowan heard the gap inside the sentence. He was wise enough not to press it directly. What do you want me to do? Kael walked to the table and picked up the folded blood-stained cloth Amara had touched earlier. He had not realized she had reached for it until the guards found her. Now he wondered whether that touch had woken the silver burn in him before his hand ever closed around her wrist. Find out everything about her. Rowan frowned. Amara? Quietly. She has lived in the mansion since childhood. An orphan from the border. Omega rank. No shift record. Assigned to lower service under Madra. Sometimes assists Nara with herbs. I know what the records say. Then what are you looking for? Kael turned the cloth over. A faint dark stain cut through the center. Not fresh enough to concern a servant. Not old enough to ignore. The truth. Rowan's face grew serious. Kael continued. Where Nara found her. Who approved her being brought into the mansion. Which elder signed the record. Whether her name appeared anywhere before the council changed it. Whether she has family ties no one speaks of. Rowan studied him carefully. You think the records were altered. I think Moonstone Pack remembers only what the council permits it to remember. That was a dangerous sentence for an alpha to say aloud, even in a locked room. Rowan knew it. So did Kael. The beta crossed his arms, thinking, if I ask too loudly, Varric will know. Then do not ask loudly. If I go through archives, the keepers will report it. Use the old patrol ledgers, border deaths, healing logs, servant intake lists, anything beneath council attention. Rowan nodded slowly. Then his eyes returned to Kael's fist. What marked you? Kael did not answer. Rowan stepped closer. Let me see. No. If it came from her, I need to know what I am investigating. Kael's eyes flashed. His wolf stirred with possessive warning, weak and fierce at once. Rowan felt the shift in the room and went still. There it was again. The mate instinct, protect, even from a loyal beta. Kael hated it. He hated the loss of control, hated the sudden surge of emotion attached to a woman he barely knew, hated the fact that his wolf, half-starved by pain, still had strength enough to warn his closest ally away from Amara's name. Rowan saw that too. You are already reacting like she belongs to you. Kael's voice lowered. She belongs to no one. That sentence surprised them both. It did not sound like alpha law. It sounded like conviction. For a moment, Amara's face returned to him, not the version the hall had laughed at. The version he had seen in the space between touch and rejection. Wide eyes, frightened, yes. Hurt, yes. Yet beneath it, something unbroken. Something trying to stay hidden. He remembered the silver glow under her skin. He remembered fear crossing her face when she saw he had noticed. She had not wanted the pack to see. Why? Rowan exhaled slowly. I will look into her past. Tonight. Rowan's gaze sharpened. That urgent? Kael looked down at his hand. The silver burn pulsed. Yes. Rowan gave a single nod. As he turned to leave, he paused near the door. The elders will push harder now. The ceremony is tomorrow. If you refuse Isolde, they will demand a reason. Kael's face went still. They will have none. And if your wolf refuses her in front of the altar, that question entered the room like a blade. Subscribe for more stories on Forbidden Bonds.